Welcome to a special edition of Crawford County Outdoors. I'm Duane Kohler, and we're going to enjoy here another do-it-yourself type project today. And I'm holding a canoe paddle that I made. Now, there's quite a story to this, and so let me tell you the story in a couple parts. First of all, I think it was in 1999, a big storm came through and knocked down a bunch of trees at Allegheny College. I think everybody remembers that. Passed through the north side of town, and it unfortunately hit our backyard and knocked down a big ash tree, which smashed up our shed, knocked right through the roof of the shed. So of course we spent the next several weeks, month, whatever, cleaning up after that. But as that tree, and the insurance company replaced the shed and all that kind of stuff. And that tree was laying very conveniently about this far off the ground, tipped up, and I'm like, I wonder if I could do something with that tree. So I took my chainsaw and cut planks vertically out of the chunk of the tree and made canoe paddles for family and friends. And when we had friends that had done us favors, or someone had a birthday present, or all that kind of stuff, and actually that was a lot of fun. So that might be a future project. Maybe we'll do that on the show somewhere down the road. But cut a plank out without even the plate that I've used now more recently for making timber out of with the chainsaw out of logs. This was like one of the last pieces left over. I had, I think, maybe 3 planks, and I made like 2 canoe paddles out of each one, and so I made one for myself. And now, one thing with a canoe paddle, I remember way back when I was in Boy Scouts, you always wanted your canoe paddle to come up to about your lip or your nose or whatever. So, and I'm kind of tall, so the regular ones from the store were never long enough for me. So I was going to make one that was just my size. So made this canoe paddle, cut the plank out, and ran it through the planer to smooth it out. Used the circular saw to cut the straight line on both sides, and used the belt sander to make the little notches on the handle so that you had a nice place to grab onto, and so on. And then use the hand planer to flatten out this side. Again, we might do that as a future thing for the show. Even on this one, I put some epoxy on the tip, so if I hit a rock, it wouldn't chip the tip and all that kind of stuff. So my brother-in-law was up, and I got in one canoe, and he got another canoe, so we were having a race. And I started paddling away and never even realized, but there was a knot on, it doesn't even show all the way through, but there was a knot on one side at the handle, right where the paddle meets the shaft here, and crack. And I'm like, oh! So I was real gentle going the rest of the way on our race, and so I didn't win the race because I didn't want to break the paddle. So this has become just a decoration after that. So it's like, okay, ash wood, baseball bats, canoe paddles. That's what they were all made of forever and ever, out of ash wood. And I had this idea. It's like, all right, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I thought, well, why don't we laminate? Why don't we make pieces, cut them in strips, and then laminate the strips together with real strong glue, and that might prevent that for down the road. So this one began to become a decoration on the wall. It got in the water for like 5 minutes till I broke it. And it's like, if you look on this side, no knob, nothing at all. And then you see it on this side, and I don't know if you can see from looking there, but nice crack all the way through. So yeah, you have a little branch or something that was growing there, and that made a weak spot. So my solution for down the road for that was, all right, well, when we're going to do this in the future, we'll do this in a laminated way, thin strips, and then glue the strips together. So I haven't been spending as much time canoe paddling as I have been kayak paddling in recent times. So I thought, let's make a kayak paddle. So definitely had lots of ash wood available. I mean, as Dr. Bowden told us from Allegheny, the blight that's affecting the ash trees in the area is definitely hit our area, and ash trees are coming down, unfortunately. Okay, we had unfortunately an ash tree that was in the yard that had been a beautiful tree right next to the deck forever and ever, and boom, it just died like 2 years ago, and it was starting to get ready to come down. So the tree service came because it was so close to the house. I couldn't take it down myself without a special crane, and they took it down for us and all that. So, and I'm thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice that, this is me, I guess, wouldn't it be nice to have something fun out of that tree? So, and at some point, not too far down the road, probably not going to be ash wood available anymore, since all the trees are coming down, and just based on what's going on in my neighborhood here, most of the neighbors are making those into firewood. So let's make some projects out of the ash wood while it's still around, and actually one plank out of the ash tree, you know, might be enough for a couple of projects. So anyways, how do you make a plank out of a log? So the first step is to get the log on the ground, and, you know, approximate manageable length. So in this case, the log was about 10 feet 10 or 11 feet long, something like that. And I have some video, we had it on the show before, but I have some video from another time when Dr. John Ziegler and I were cutting some planks out. So you get that plate bolted on top of the chainsaw and then have a nice flat surface to go from, to be your guide, and make that first cut, and then you make whatever thickness of cuts. So for the case for this project, I made sure I was a little over 1.5 inches thick for the project. And then when you're cutting, of course, you want to be very cautious with like that, and you'll see in the video, we have it sped up so that it didn't take the whole 15 minutes, but I think it takes about 30 or 40 seconds for it to run through that cutting out that plank. But you want to be careful because you're using a chainsaw, and that's a potentially dangerous situation. But run through and cut your plank out, and as you're going along, maybe put some wedges in behind you so that the weight of the log, weight of the pressure of the plank is letting that chain continue to pass through. So you're going to get some marks from the chain. It's not the same as having a really fancy through the sawmill kind of a thing. But again, maybe this is more of a, okay, that's my tree that grew in the backyard right next to my deck, and I want to use that tree, so I want to use that particular wood for this project. So yeah, you cut the plank out with your chainsaw, and like I did for the first time for the canoe paddle. You actually could even cut it without that special thing, but I use that thing all the time now for making projects, and I really enjoy that. And that's kind of one of my favorite things. It's like, okay, this was kind of like a special tree that was a neighborhood tree, or that was in a family member's house or yard or whatever. And so in this case for my canoe paddle, okay, it's a nice decoration now in the man cave part of my house, and it's not really going to get used as a canoe paddle anymore, but it is a nice decoration. And the ash wood, that worked out well. Okay, so how do you get the things started? So first what I did was I took the plank and cut a nice straight edge on the plank using just a regular circular saw and a 2x6. So clamped it on the edge of the plank and used a circular saw, and then just took my time. And actually that was actually relatively easy to do. The circular saw, just use the edge of the gate on the circular saw and follow along on the side of that guide, and make sure you have a nice straight one. Make sure you don't have one that's warped or one that's got chips or cracks in it or whatever. But use that circular saw to get that nice straight guide. Now what I did then to cut my laminating strips, and I'm making them so that they're that 1.5 inches wide, and then I was going for maybe a 1/2 inch, give or take, thickness for each of the strips. So I set up my little portable table saw, and I ran the plank through the table saw, and then ran the strip through with the straight side first. You need that straight cut to make you a good guide to really get off and rolling there. One thing too, by the way, when you're working with a circular saw, I think maybe from the footage that you'll see as we were getting some footage as we were going along there, it looks like my hand was close to the blade. Really, that's just a kind of an optical illusion from where the camera was, because I was kind of pushing it towards the camera so that you could see what it would look like. Keep your hands away from the blade, and don't push your hands towards the blade. Push, and if you want to get something else, a block of wood or whatever, to use to push when you're pushing towards the blade. But keep pressure against the guide so that you keep that nice straight edge. And even if it's not perfect, if it varies just a 1/16 of an inch or whatever, for the purposes of this kind of project, and you'll see as we go along here, that stuff will all kind of work out in the sanding and in the running through the planer and all that kind of stuff. You'll get all those things kind of cleaned up. So the circular saw was what we used, the table saw to get that going. Circular saw first, table saw to to get it going. Multiple passes. Okay. Then we took the 1.5 inch thick strips that were about a 1/2 inch wide, and made 3 of them. So I had 3 of them cut out from the same log. So I wanted to reverse one so that I had the grain going a different way. Again, I'm back to, okay, if I had that little knot in my canoe paddle, and if there's one in there that I didn't see, like in the case of this one, I don't want that messing up the project. So I reversed the middle strip out of the 3 laminated strips that we cut, and put it one way, and then put the other 2 the way they were originally, and flipped one of them over so they were all a different direction. And I decided to use Gorilla Glue. You can use the white glue, but you got to make sure it's a waterproof version of the white glue, and there's different ones like that. But the Gorilla Glue is very, very strong. actually they recommend in the directions that you dampen the log to start with, and so I had the log drying outside, so it actually kind of was a little bit damp from being outside, but they recommend that you dampen the log in the first place, and that actually makes the glue even foam up more. And it does a way of kind of foaming and filling up any gaps you have and so on. Okay, so another thing about when you're using the Gorilla Glue, get some gloves on, because that stuff is really, it'll stick on your hands for days after you after you use it. You get it on your hands. So the Gorilla Glue, again, has some flexibility built in with it in addition to its waterproof nature. So spread it on so that you don't have any gaps between where the glue is, because you want when you put some pressure on, you're gonna squeeze the strips together. You want to have no gaps in the glue in between, so you want to keep a straight line. And I kind of zigzag along when you're doing the white glue. I see sometimes people will put it on there and then take like a spatula kind of a thing and spread it out so it's totally covered. And you don't really need to do that with a Gorilla Glue, because it kind of expands on its own, and it's some kind of a polymer, and I forget which one, but I've worked with all the different ones, and that one seems to me was the right one to use for this particular project. And then when you're clamping it together, you can use the little speed clamps like this one. I kind of like a clamp that you actually crank, like a C clamp, and I had several of those from a million years ago that I had, and several of these, and so maybe every 6 or 8 inches or so have a clamp on there. So you're going to probably need a bunch of them to do that laminating process, and then you'll be using them again later on in the project too. But the laminating, it needs to dry, so that's, again, this project, we've stretched it out already over about a month, because we were waiting for it to get to be 40 degrees or warmer, because that's when the glue needs to be, and I didn't want to get them in the house, get it in the garage floor or anything. So 40 degrees or warmer, so we were waiting for warmer days and when it wasn't snowing or when it wasn't raining or whatever. And so use this clamp, use a C clamp, don't put it so tight that you squeeze all the glue out, but put it tight enough so that you can sort of you can sort of see whenever it's if there's any gaps or whatever. So if you have a gap in a certain spot, put a clamp there. Okay, so once you get the shaft made that way, as we did, so it's kind of not totally square, it was about 1.5 inches by about 1 inch. I ran it through the planer, and each time I would run it through the planer, I would adjust the depth of the cutting gauge about 1/8 of an inch. Multiple passes, and I ran through all 4 sides so that I would have a nice, very smooth finish on each side. And again, doesn't have to be totally perfect, because there's going to be a lot more sanding and stuff as the project goes along. And if there were some small gaps, I discovered a couple small gaps, and again, didn't worry about that too much, because I know as we were going to round off the corners and all that kind of stuff, that if there's any little bitty gaps, we can fill those in at the end. But in general, the planing was actually a pretty straightforward process, and you run it through, and as I mentioned before, the table saw, you know, it looks like my hands are right by the planer, but they really weren't. That's just a kind of an optical illusion from the angle that we had the camera set up, so that you could see the piece going all the way through the planer and coming. Actually, it's kind of coming at you there. But the planer is a real handy tool to have around. If you don't have a planer, you can actually use a hand planer, or even the old-fashioned plane. You can use that too. But it's real helpful to get a nice smooth surface on all 4 sides, because we're going to need that later on. Okay, so prepping the shaft for the blade is the next step. So I made a pattern from a curve, and it's kind of like, in my case, I like the curve shape of the paddle. The canoe paddle is very flat. Most of the kayak paddles that you see, that you get from the store, have a curve to the paddle. I think you can probably see that. So I kind of used that as a model, and so that was about 1.5 inches worth of curve. Now this particular one was 18, and it's real narrow, so I want this paddle to match me and to match my needs, and so this is my exercise, so I want to get out there and I want to really work hard, and I want that thing to grab a lot of water. So I'm going to modify my shape a little bit and not be quite as narrow here, because I want it to catch a lot of water. And also, if you look at it this way, it actually kind of falls back away from the center a little bit. I want to make the opposite. I want to make kind of a scoop shape so it really grabs that water when I'm paddling. So that's part of the reason why I'm doing this project in the first place, is so I can modify it and have it be the way I want to have it be, not the way that comes from the store. So there's one thing too that we want to watch out for as we're making this paddle shape, is when the downhill part that faces lower. So when I'm paddling, this part would face that way, is so we don't have a kind of like a square edge that's going to catch on a rock or on the bottom of the creek or on the bottom of the lake or whatever, and knock that up. So it's like that's kind of angle. That makes sense. So I'm going to do that same type of shape. So not quite so angled here. I'm going to have a little bit more here, a little bit more here, and that same shape here. But then that angle, so I don't break that. I don't catch it on everything. So. Okay, so we want that curve. So to make that curve, I'm going to use that same 1.5 inch ash wood that we cut before, and I will cut that out with the jigsaw. I came up with a cardboard pattern to make that angled, to make that curved shape there, and mark that on the shaft. And then, so I cut the piece out on the inside of the shaft, and then took that same piece and glued it on the back of the shaft. So that'll give us a nice place to glue the paddle strips onto the shaft. As I cut these pieces out, I used that same model to make this cut on the shaft. And then, so I wanted to make sure I had a good place to anchor them on here. So you can see that's actually worked out pretty well. That was the trickiest part of this whole project so far, was getting these together, but we'll cover that in a minute. But so making the shaft and having it prepped for the paddle pieces. The next part, by the way, the paddle shape is in about 18 to 20 inches long. And so, again, I made it 20 inches long so that I can sand it down or shave off a piece here or there if I need to, or if I crack something, that I can, have a place to patch it up. And I made this, and I think you can probably see it from where you're looking. I made this 3/4 of an inch thick, and really, if you compare that one to the store-bought paddle, the store-bought paddle's like a 1/16 of an inch thick. It's really, really skinny. I did that on purpose so I'd have lots of room to sand down, and so I could get the shape the way I wanted it to. Now the wood is going to need to be thicker in the end than that fancy fiberglass deal, but this leaves me a lot of room to maneuver from. So that was the point of that. Okay, making the blades. The perfect way to make those blades would be if you had a bandsaw. I have a bandsaw, but it doesn't work very well, and it kind of came apart and so on. So I use my jigsaw, and again, made a shape, and you'll be able to see, was able to follow with the jigsaw. Okay, so we've made the 3/4 inch thick curved pieces that are going to be the paddle. The paddle head, and now we've got the shape cut into the paddle shaft, so it's going to kind of match the shape of those. And I on purpose made it a little thicker so that I would have the ability to trim from both the outside and the inside, and so I don't mind having some extra stuff I'm going to be trimming off. Key piece here to think about now is, okay, so now I want the shaft to be nice and round so that I have a nice grip rather than a nice rectangular shaft. That's not going to be fun to grip. So I got out the router, and I have a 1/2 inch router blade that just kind of like for about 1 inch or 1.5 inches thick. We'll make a nice round. It's not going to make it perfectly round, but we can sand more. Actually, don't even have to, for that matter. So running it through the router, that's a little tricky also. So I like the router table. I actually made it a point to kind of clamp it onto the sawhorse so that it wouldn't wiggle around. But the router, it has about a 1/2 inch of a curve, so you adjust the height so that if you're making like a plaque to mount your antlers on or whatever, you might want a ridge, and like a lip and so on, and so you can adjust it a little bit higher. In this particular case, I adjusted it so there'd just be a teeny little bit of a ridge there, so I would know where the edge was and sand it. But carefully run through. If you put the paddle pieces on already, you're not going to be able to be able to get the router right up to the edge of where you're going to be gripping, right where the paddle head meets the shaft. So run it through all 4 sides, and I ran it through multiple times so that I could keep trimming it down. And again, I was just going for even like that store-bought one, so it doesn't have to be perfectly round, but kind of rounded. It's going to be easier to grip when it's rounded. And again, you can sand it however you choose to at the end. Okay, so there's the shaft having been put through the router table. Okay, trickiest part so far. So we had the blade pieces cut out. So carefully spread Gorilla Glue. Get some rubber gloves on again too, by the way, because that Gorilla Glue gets, it really works, and it'll stick on your skin for days and days, and you don't want to get it on your clothes because it'll stick on your clothes permanently. So spread the Gorilla Glue, again, like we talked about before when making the shafts, so it's completely, not with gaps in between, because you don't want to have, if we do have to sand it down tight, we want to have a piece where there's no glue holding it. We want that glue to be in continuous spread all the way through. Now that was the tricky part, so I came up after a couple of difficult times. I came up with this slip clamp to kind of just hold them in place until I could kind of get them lined up. So, you know, kind of got that slide clamp on there, and then got them lined up, and then put the bigger versions of the C-clamp, the ones that have a kind of a crankhead. And just like we talked about before, you want to get them nice and tight, but not so tight that you squeeze all the glue out. And then you need a good 8 hours or so for it to dry. And that's how we got to this point, was doing all that. So I wanted to have you see here live how we can sort of make this shape and get exactly the way we want it to be shaped for going forward. Okay, so this has been now drying for, actually it's probably been over a week now. I'm just going to clamp this onto the sawhorse here so it doesn't wiggle around when I'm carving here. Okay, that'll be all right. Now, when you're going to do some trimming and carving, an angle grinder is a good way to go. This one I've used for a long time, and this one's actually kind of got a little bit of wear, but that's almost like I think you can probably see that, almost like a chainsaw head with chainsaw teeth, and it does a good job of trimming things out. We use that on Adirondack chairs, you know, for a bunch of projects, including ones I think maybe we used that for ones we've done at Crawford County Outdoors before, but I saw online a similar type of head, but it's like a little bit more aggressive. So I thought, well, let's give that a try. So this is going to be a first attempt, and we're going to try that. It has 6 big teeth and a little gap under each tooth so that the chips can fly out. But it's got kind of a round, I think you can see it that way, it has kind of a rounded shape there. And we want that rounded shape on the inside of the paddle. So let me get my safety glasses on and get that plugged in. That one's really aggressive, boy. First time I tried that. Let me try the chainsaw one, see how that works, if I can go a little, maybe just a little bit closer. So between the two, got some carving going pretty fast there. Okay, so between the fancy, very aggressive cutter and the chainsaw head cutter, which was pretty good, we got a pretty good shape there started. Let's just take a quick, okay, this is unplugged, so I'm not going to cut myself. And then you push that button down to lock it. And then I'm going to change this head to the sanding head. Okay, if I can get the lock lined up here. There it is, okay. So you hold that red button down to lock it in place. And then you need, of course, that wrench thing to get it going. Now, I haven't tried these before, but this is a flap sander, sanding head that's, again, made specifically for this little angle grinder. Trying some new things here, working out pretty well so far. Oops, lost my lock. There we go. Tighten it down. Okay. So we'll try some sanding, see how that works out. You can see some small gaps here. We will put some filler in there so that water's not flowing through when we're paddling. But that was only just a few minutes to go through that kind of grinding process and carving process. That really moved quickly. Okay, try some sanding here. That was pretty fast with the two different grinding heads and this sander with the flap sanding. That really smoothed that down pretty quickly. I'm pretty pleased with that. All right, so let's flip it over. And we got some trimming to do on the back, just like we did on the front. So in the front, I'm trying to kind of make that curve shape both this way and this way. And on the back, I'm just going to try and even it out here. So far so good. This is working out well. You flip it over. Go back to that aggressive head here. All right, back to the chainsaw here. Seems like hitting it from a couple different angles seems to help with the marks from the grinder. All right, we'll get out that sander again here. You can see where the laminations are here on the shaft part. That's pretty cool. All right, one last little bit of sanding, just a regular drill with a little sanding head on there, and we'll see if we can smooth this down just a little bit more. And then the final step is going to be to get out the jigsaw and trim that shape. A little bit of glue still on the shaft there. I can touch that up. That's pretty good. Let me flip it over and hit the front side again with this sander. That's worked out pretty well. All right, we can still sand some more if we want to work on that thickness. But we definitely are on the right track here. These little bitty gaps here will fill in after. but they're not all the way through. They're just a little bit on the inside. All right, the next step will be to get that shape that we like here. Got my store-bought kayak paddle here, and I'm just gonna trace this end shape. And at this end, I'm gonna make the shape just a lot bigger and kind of more general. Go with the jigsaw here. Looks like I got a little bit of sanding, a little bit more sanding to do around the edges, but we're getting pretty close. Let's give you a better view here. Touch up a little bit more on the sanding, and then we're going to be ready to finish it up. Well, that new paddle's working great. Well, thank you all for joining us today on Crawford County Outdoors. I'm going to go paddle around some more and make sure I have got it all figured out here, and if I need to do anything different the next time I make one. Once again, thanks for joining us on Crawford County Outdoors, and we'll talk to you next time.